Welcome to the Emerald City Sportscast.
Wilson, it as he throws deep downfield. It's going to be caught by Metcalf for the touchdown.
Hosted by longtime Northwest sports journalist Dan Viennes.
Here's the drive deep to left. He has done it again. Wow. Kyle Lewis, 3 games, 3 home runs. Mariners have a 5-2 lead.
Brought to you by Hollywood and Vines Recording Studio. World-class audio recording right in the heart of the Woodinville Winery District.
Wide receivers to either side. Russell takes the snap, drops back. He's going to throw down the middle. He's got a man. The ball is caught.
Game over,
it is
baby.
a touchdown. The game is over. The Seahawks are going back to the Super Bowl.
And now, broadcasting live from the Dan Cave Studios, here's your host, Dan Viennes.
Welcome to the last day of March 2021. I am Dan Viennes. You are listening to the Emerald City Sportscast. Hard to believe that we are a quarter of the way through this year already. 2021 is 25% in the books. Lots to get to today. We have baseball and football talk as we are on the verge of the Major League Baseball regular season. But first, let's get to some headlines, shall we?
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
And now, here's today's headlines, brought to you by FreeBets, the newest online sports betting comparison site. Check them out at freebets.us.
The Gonzaga Bulldogs steamrolled their way to their second Final Four in school history as they beat USC last night, 85-56. It was never in doubt. The Bulldogs moved to 30-0 as they bid to become the first NCAA men's team to go undefeated since Indiana in 1976. They play 11th seeded UCLA on Saturday. Houston and Baylor round out the Final Four. And the NFL made it official yesterday. There will be 17 games now in the regular season. They essentially take one away from the preseason. Will now just be 3 games and add it to the regular season. That goes into effect immediately. So for the Seahawks this year, that means that they will play the Pittsburgh Steelers as their 17th game. The official schedule should come out sometime over the next month. Usually comes out right before the draft. That's it for headlines today because we have a lot to get to on the show today. Opening day is tomorrow. It's kind of weird. A Thursday. There's a lot of weird things about this season, okay? Let's face it. Opening day is usually Sunday, Monday, right? It used to always be Monday, the same day as the NCAA National Championship game. That always seemed to be kind of a conflict. And then they started moving some of the games to Sunday night baseball for national exposure. And now it's tomorrow. It's bizarre. The other strange thing is that we're talking about interconference play. Right? So the Mariners open against the Giants tomorrow at T-Mobile Park, but there will be fans in the stands, about 9,000. I have a feeling that 9,000 is going to sound like twice that many. And I think we're in for, that's why I want to start with baseball today. I think we're in for one of the most captivating and interesting Mariner seasons in a very long time. And I'm going to get into why. But those of you who have been following the Mariners closely know why. Those that have been following casually, maybe today's show is for you. Because I still hear it. I still hear it all the time. I made a comment at work. I've made the comment multiple times over the last week. God, it's almost opening day. It's almost baseball season. I can't wait. And I get a lot of, it's too bad the Mariners still suck. Sometimes they'll say it's too bad the Mariners always suck. And I'll say, it's different now. They're finally building it the right way. They rebuilt it the right way. They made a commitment to it. And then what do they come back with? We've heard that before. Well, it's different now. 7 of the top 100 prospects, 2 of the top 5, second-ranked farm system in all of baseball. Dead last 2.5 years ago. Yeah, but as soon as those kids become good, they'll trade them away. I mean, that perception is still there. And I suppose that's warranted in some respects because the casual fan doesn't understand new ownership, new management, new way of doing things from top to bottom. If you're just now tuning into the rebuild, newsflash, the Mariners are doing things differently now. And we're seeing the results of that. And this will be the first season that we start to see some of that. Well, that's not necessarily true. We started to see some of that last year. Kyle Lewis, Rookie of the Year. Evan White, Gold Glove. We saw some of those young guys come up and produce last year. But with the truncated season and the alternate training site, no minor league season, we didn't really get to see, even at the Tacoma level or Arkansas, we didn't get to see some of those other highly touted prospects perform. So I think it took a little bit of the shine off of the rebuild process from a public relations standpoint. This is the year. We still don't know when the minor league season is going to fire up, but we think it's going to be within the next 30 days or so. This is the year we're really going to see a lot of that come to fruition. We're going to see it in action. We're going to see Jared Kelenic. We're going to see Logan Gilbert. We might see Cal Raleigh. And then we can go to minor league games. We can see all of them. We can see Julio Rodriguez. I'll get into some of the other names. So I want to kind of break down some things this year. Rather than do a big roster preview, a big in-depth projection, I just want to focus on a couple things. And the first one is that what's going to be, for me, the key moment of the season to keep an eye out for. And I wanted to talk about this because I think it's worth giving you a heads up on what moment to watch for. Because if you tune in tomorrow, and unfortunately I won't be able to tune in live, I'll be at work. But if you tune in tomorrow, after listening to the show, you might think, what the hell is Dan talking about? Like, it's always fun watching Marco Gonzalez on the mound. It'll be interesting to see how they use some of the bullpen pieces. But Kyle Lewis isn't going to be in the lineup, banged up his knee a little bit the other day. No Jared Kelenic yet. Catcher might be hitting fourth. So I want to go into this. To me, the key moment of the season to keep your eye out for. Not that it won't be fun until this happens, but it's the day Jared Kelenic's called up. And not just because he's a good player. 21 years old, former top 5 pick in the draft. He was the centerpiece of that trade, sending Robinson Cano, Edwin Diaz to the Mets. Kind of jump-started this rebuild. It's not just because he's a good young player. Mariners have had those before, right? It's so much more than that. He is, I believe, their Russell Wilson. And I'll get into that comparison a little bit later when we talk about the Seahawks. But I think he could also be their Jay Buhner. For the sake of a Mariner conversation, this might be a little more easier for you to conceive. they're not similar players. Jay Buhner much bigger, much stronger, relied more on his power. But when Jay Buhner arrived in that infamous trade, I was going to say famous trade, but it's infamous because of Seinfeld, right? When a trade gets immortalized on an episode of Seinfeld, and the Mariners trade Ken Phelps to the Yankees, an aging, broken down DH for a young outfield prospect named Jay Buhner. Kind of flew under the radar. I don't think it was even a deadline deal. I think it was a waiver wire deal, an August deal. Mariners were terrible. This young kid comes in. He wasn't just a good player, obviously. Mariners Hall of Famer, multiple All-Star. He transformed the culture. He transformed that clubhouse. That clubhouse at the time was very passive. There was a criticism back in that time. In fact, there was an article written, I want to say it was in the Seattle Times, about is the Mariners Major League roster too Christian, too full of church-going do-gooders to be a good baseball team? That literally was a criticism that was levied against the team at the time. Harold Reynolds, Alvin Davis. A lot of good dudes, but there was no edge. Jay Buhner brought that edge. Swearing, spitting, crashing into walls, diving for baseballs, playing like his life depended on it for a team that was going nowhere. That's how he approached the game. And it was a game changer at the time for the Mariners. I see Jared Kelenic in much the same light. He's going to provide an injection of attitude. Kyle Lewis is a good player. Could be a keystone player for the Mariners for a long time. Great personality, great kid. Doesn't have that energy. Evan White certainly doesn't have that energy. Great dude, everything you want in a ball player. Does all the right things, works hard. Kind of goes about his business. Even Mitch Haniger, Kyle Seager. Utmost gentlemen. Extremely professional in how they approach their game day in, day out. You got to have guys like Kelenic to win championships. You see it on teams all the time. Jim Rat plays with an edge, has some personality, wants to be great, drives himself to be great every single day, doesn't want to settle for not being great. Bulldog mentality. I think that's going to shape this club and elevate it moving forward. And it'll really get fun when Julio Rodriguez arrives on the major league scene too, because he's similar in some ways. He's more of the gregarious type, big personality, but he's at least a year away. Kelenic's going to be on the big league club, and I think it's going to be by June. That's a big moment. He could hit 220 his first 60 days in the big leagues and still have a positive impact on that roster. I think he's a centerpiece, and I think he's going to help really shape the personality of that ball club moving forward. And I'm going to make an analogy later on in the show. I mentioned that I think he could be their Russell Wilson. I'm going to make that comparison with where the Seahawks were in their development when Russell arrived, and kind of how that fits in with what I think this season sort of looks like. So until then, that's not the only thing I'm going to be watching, right? So what am I going to be watching until then, and even beyond then, once Kelenic is called up? I'm still going to be watching the key pieces of the rebuild to begin with. And that's Kyle Lewis, Evan White, and the two kids that are on the opening day roster that came over. Well, three. We can talk about Lewis Torrens, too. He'll share catching duties with Tom Murphy. But I'm most excited about Ty France and Taylor Trammell. Trammell wins the left field job with an outstanding spring training. Really kind of made it easy on the organization because even when Kelenic banged up his knee, all eyes were on Kelenic after the Kevin Mather statements and before he got essentially fired. There was going to be a lot of pressure on the club to put Kelenic on the opening day roster if he had a good spring. He was having a great spring. Then he banged up his knee, came back and played well after that. But the fact he missed time and the fact that Trammell, from start to finish, had an outstanding spring. There's no question he deserves to make the opening day roster. Never played a game at AAA. Only has 120-ish games at AA. And then last year, there was no AAA season, obviously, so he was the alternate training site, first with the Cincinnati Reds and then with the San Diego Padres after he was traded to them. Top 100 prospect, uber athletic outfielder, will probably be the opening day center fielder until Kyle Lewis is ready, till his knee feels better. But Trammell's fun. Questions about the hit tool, but he was outstanding this spring. But he's got power. He runs well. You probably can't call him one of those classic five-tool prospects because his arm isn't great. But he's a good defender, good athlete. And Ty France might be the best hitter on the team. He's a guy that I talked about on the old podcast, the Dan Cave, 3 years ago, in 2018, when he was stuck and he was hitting home runs like crazy for the Padres AAA team, and he was stuck because they had signed Manny Machado. Or 2019, I guess it would be. And I was trying to identify a future third baseman the Mariners could target. Some think he's good enough at third that he could take over for Kyle Seager for full time. But he's gonna be in the lineup almost every day. He's gonna play some second. I think Dylan Moore will share the second base duties. He's gonna play some second. He's gonna DH. He's gonna play some third. Give Kyle Seager a day off. Or Kyle can DH once in a while. We might even see him at first base a little bit if you want to give Evan White a blow. Led the team with 5 home runs in the spring. It's going to be fun to watch. Really great approach at the plate. Just a pure professional hitter. Love Ty France. Love that trade. But I'm going to be watching the veterans too. And specifically Mitch Haniger and James Paxton, because from the day they set foot on the field for the Mariners this year, the question's going to be, how good are they? How healthy are they? They're going to be able to perform. Both look great in the spring. Haniger hit .297, a couple home runs. Paxton pitched 8 innings. He was held back for a little bit with his visa issues coming from Canada. 8 innings pitched, only gave up 4 hits, 4 walks, 17 strikeouts. He looked great. If Haniger and Paxton are healthy, then it's going to be an interesting storyline watching the first half of the season because the question will be keep or trade. Do you keep him or trade him? I can make the argument. Eric and I talked about it last week. You got to have some veterans when you carry a rebuild forward. It would make a lot of sense to keep Haniger. As I said, goes about his business in such a professional way. Really great influence for the young guys. And he's a good player. He's an all-star. And James Paxton, if he can, we've been saying this his whole career, but if he can really be healthy, Mariners signed him to a 1-year deal. But they've even said on the record, look, we'd like to keep him long-term. But if he comes out and has a great first half, an all-star first half, you can turn around and trade him again. He brought us Justice Sheffield the first time. Won't bring as much with no club control after the year, but You could turn around, trade him at the deadline, and re-sign him again as a free agent for a third go. But I kind of think they'd like to keep him around. Maybe sign him to an extension. And then the pitching's always interesting and fun to watch. Can Justice Sheffield take a step forward? Wasn't that great this spring? ERA over 5, control issues again. Be fun to watch Justin Dunn. Can he take the positives we saw from this spring, the increased velocity, the improved breaking ball? The raw stuff is better this year. Can he carry that over and sustain it? Or is he destined to end up in the bullpen, as many thought he might when he was drafted? Big year for Yusei Kikuchi. Is he going to be good enough this year for the team to exercise that? I think it's a 4-year option that triggers at the end of this year, or they can let him walk. And then we await the arrival of Logan Gilbert. It's been assumed that he would make his debut this year fairly early, but with no minor league season, the fact that they really he had the one major league appearance in spring training. They wanted to take it easy on him, really manage his innings. I still think we'll see him at some point, but it might be really late in the season. And then another thing I'm going to be keeping an eye on this year is just, and I would encourage all of you to as well, is just enjoy Kyle Seager. The minute he hangs him up, he should be put in the Mariners Hall of Fame. One of their best players in history. And still playing at a high level. You know, he struggled 2 years ago. He fixed some things with his body and his swing. He's been great ever since. Hit .350 this spring. And as Eric and I talked a little bit about last week, I think I think it makes more sense if Mitch Haniger has a great first half and he still has one more arbitration year. If you can get a nice little return for Mitch Haniger at the deadline, it makes more sense to move him and get value in return because you have so many outfielders coming. It's really the strength of the system right now other than starting pitching is outfield talent. Outfield talent that's not all that far away. But Seager, that team option of $15 million last year, as I said, or next year, as I said last week, for that to make sense to the analytics people, just have to be a 1.5 win player. He was a 1.5 win player last year in a 60-game season. Pretty sure he's going to be a 2 or 3 win player this year. $15 million is a bargain. It might make sense to bring him back one more year on that option. Or we could be talking about trading him at the deadline too if he has a great first half, because the same logic stands to reason for another team looking to acquire him. If he's traded, there's a clause in his contract. That option next year becomes automatic. And that's kind of been that poison pill that's made him hard to trade the last couple of years, because you have 2-3 years of $18 million, you have 40, 50 million left on that deal. That's a different pill to swallow for another team with an aging veteran, right? But this year, this offseason, if he's killing it in the first half, he's the best version of Kyle Seager, he could be attractive to a team. At $8-9 million for the rest of this season, maybe the Mariners even kick in a little bit of that, and then knowing that he's only going to cost $15 million next year. Guy that's still not a Gold Glover at third base anymore, but still one of the best in the league. Hit the ball out of the ballpark, better approach at the plate, great clubhouse guy. So enjoy him while you have him. I think they should consider keeping him around for at least one more year. I think he'd be a valuable guy to have on this roster moving forward, but I think the team has decided this will be it. And he could also get traded. So just enjoy watching Kyle Seager. And don't ever forget that he was taken in the 3rd round out of North Carolina in the same draft that we took Dustin Ackley, his teammate, with the 2nd overall pick. And Seager was supposed to be a minor league filler, maybe a role player, maybe a guy that could play some second base, be a utility guy at the big league level. And Ackley was supposed to win batting championships. How'd that turn out? Biggest concern for this team, still the bullpen. Still the bullpen. They made some interesting, cool little moves over the offseason, I thought. Moving Kendall Graveman to the bullpen full-time. Acquiring Rafael Montero. Keenan Middleton. Signing him as a free agent. Montero has scuffled this spring. 6 earned runs in 7 2/3. Middleton has struck out 14 in 8 innings, but he's given up 9 earned runs. Montero's supposed to be your closer? I don't know. Graveman's looked good, not great. No one really stood out in the bullpen. A couple people did. I mean, Roenis Elias did before he got hurt. Anthony Mashevitz has been great. He's more of a situational left-hander or a guy that can pitch multiple innings. Will Vest, the Rule 5 pickup, has had a really nice spring. Look for him to stick on the roster all year so that the Mariners can control his rights. Bullpen's still the weak link. It's still going to be, there's some nice pieces there. There's upside there. There's some young guys on the cusp, guys that got sent out still again to the alternate site. Still waiting for Joey Gerber to break through, and Wyatt Mills and Aaron Fletcher and some of those guys that have kind of been on the edge. So we'll see. Kind of wonder if LJ Newsome will get moved to the bullpen full-time. He could be interesting. But still the weak link. That's still going to kind of be what keeps the Mariners from maybe, well, just winning more games. Flirting with 500. That and the fact the lineup, I think, will be inconsistent. They'll score runs in bunches, but they'll have some games they scuffle. Now, to make that comparison, to make the analogy of where this Mariners team, where I think they are compared to where the Seahawks were when they rebuilt and hired Pete Carroll in 2010. They won that first NFC West championship that first year at 7-9 with Matt Hasselbeck and Charlie Whitehurst coming in the last game of the year to seal the bid. They started picking up pieces in 2010 and 2011, and you could see it coming together. But they still needed a couple other players to put them over the top. I compare this team, or where I think this team's going to be, kind of like that 2011 Seahawks team, the one the next year. They had moved on from Matt Hasselbeck. Tavares Jackson was the starting quarterback that year. Finished 7-9 again, but missed the playoffs. But you could see the pieces coming together. They had acquired Marshawn Lynch the year before and Chris Clemens. The year before, they had drafted Earl Thomas, Russell Okung. And in the 2011 draft, that's when they got Richard Sherman, Byron Maxwell, KJ Wright. They had drafted Cam Chancellor the year before. You could see that coming together. You could certainly see the makings of the Legion of Boom. You could see those big-time pieces. Some of them were in place. And that this team was a good offseason from becoming something. And then what happened? 2012 draft. They added Bruce Irvin, Bobby Wagner, and Russell Wilson in the third round. And those guys helped elevate that team. Not just with their talent, with their personality, with their attitude, with their work ethic, their approach to the game. So I think this is a 75-win Mariner team. But it's one that's going to flash. They're going to show their potential. They're going to be funner to watch. Funner? Is that a word? They're going to be more fun to watch than they have been in a while, especially when Kelenic arrives, as I said. But they're going to have stretches where their weaknesses are exposed too. They're going to have losing streaks. But then they're going to have stretches where they're going to be exciting and fun, and they're going to have some winning streaks. And the starting pitching, frankly, is going to be good enough to keep them in games almost every night. Starting pitching is going to be solid. That 6-man rotation is going to be good. And then when the minor league season starts, oh boy. Then we're really going to have some excitement. We can go to Tacoma and watch Cal Raleigh and Logan Gilbert, Kelenic every day. If Kelenic even lasts until the AAA season starts, he may get called up from the alternate training site even before then. Especially if there's an injury. And then Everett this year, moving from short season, rookie league, essentially Class A, to High A, Advanced A. We could very likely see Julio Rodriguez there. We could finally see Isaiah Campbell, Brandon Williamson, Emerson Hancock, Sam Carlson, Zach DeLoach, potentially at some point Noelve Marte. It's going to be a fun season, and it gets started tomorrow. Mariners, Giants. Let's talk Seahawks coming back after the break. You're listening to the Emerald City Sportscast. Looking for a place of inspiration to record your next musical or vocal project? Why not do it in the middle of wine country? Hollywood and Vines Recording Studio is a 4-room boutique recording studio in the heart of Woodinville Tourist District on Hollywood Hill. Within walking distance of over 100 different wine, beer, and spirit tasting rooms, this peaceful setting offers a respite from the rat race of everything around it. The studio features 14-foot ceilings throughout and a large main tracking room, along with separate isolation rooms for drum tracking and vocals. Featuring a talented crew of freelance engineers and an impressive array of industry-leading equipment, my friends at Hollywood and Vine Studios can assist with your audio tracking, mixing, and mastering pursuits. To find out more or to book a session, email Kevin at hollywood-vines.com, call 206-235-8125, or visit hollywood-vines.com. Online gamers, have you checked out PSX Extreme? If not, you're missing out. PSX Extreme is a cutting-edge gaming website providing you with everything you need to know about the latest and greatest games. You'll find up-to-the-minute news about the gaming industry, as well as in-depth reviews of all the coolest games. The writing staff at PSX Extreme will also keep you informed on all the rumors about new games in development and impending releases. So if you can put down the controller just for a second, do yourself a favor and check out psxextreme.com.
You're listening to the Emerald City Sportscast, presented by Hollywood and Vines Recording Studio. And now, here's Dan.
All right, ever since Eric and I talked last week, and I joined Bill Alstad and Keith Myers on the Seahawks Playbook podcast, Seahawks brought back Carlos Dunlap, and that sort of put a bow on the offseason. There's still some moves left to be made. I think there's still some interesting and decent free agents out there. I think Austin Ryder would make some sense now that Kansas City has signed Austin Blythe. Ryder, their starting center the last couple years, just 29 years old still. Had an 80 pass blocking grade last year from Pro Football Focus. There's still some corners out there that could help. And you're going to find a lot of value. And then after June 1st, when teams can cut guys and spread out the cap hit, and then you're after the draft as well, you're trying to manage your roster. There will be some other veterans released. But we got into it last week, kind of just grading the offseason, essentially. Hard to imagine, really. 2 weeks ago when we talked about this, at the outset of free agency, I told you I always spend the first day of free agency convincing myself the Seahawks aren't going to make any splashy moves, and then I immediately spend the day pissed off that they don't make any splashy moves. But really what they've done, John Schneider, Pete Carroll, Matt Thomas, their cap guy, in filling holes and adding impact, pretty remarkable, really. Pretty remarkable. Bringing Carlos Dunlap kind of brings that all together. A couple days before, last Tuesday, they signed Kerry Hyder from the 49ers. Outstanding, versatile end tackle. And brought back Benson Mayowa. The last 2 years heading into the season, what's been the biggest concern? Pass rush. Not a concern going into opening day this year. Not a concern. In fact, it's better because Hyder makes it better. Hyder and Darrell Taylor, the second-round pick last year, coming into the season 100% healthy now. You look at that pass rush, which was one of the best in the league the last half of the season after Dunlap arrived. One of the worst in the league the first half. One of the best in the second half. You add Hyder and Darrell Taylor to that, forget about the fact they released Jaron Reed. He's a complimentary player. I saw a report before he signed with the Chiefs that the Cowboys were considering adding star defensive tackle Jaron Reed. Like, what's your definition of star? He had 10.5 sacks 2 years ago, yeah. Playing next to Jadeveon Clowney. So, I think that role is going to be filled. I think it's going to be filled by LJ Collier. I think he fits better as a 3 technique. I think he makes that move essentially full-time. And the team just keeps rolling. And from day one next year, whoever we play, the first game right out of the gate, they gotta get ready for that pass rush. And the other thing I like is that they structure these deals. It's set for the next 2 years. We don't have to go through this song and dance and this hand-wringing over the pass rush again next offseason. These guys are all here for 2 more years at least. Really answer some questions going into next offseason. And you can see where the areas they'll need to target next offseason with what looks to be quite a bit of available cap space. We find out how they manipulated the cap. What we have assumed since they traded for Gabe Jackson from the Raiders was announced yesterday. They extended him, tore up his 2-year deal, gave him a new 3-year deal, lowered his cap hit to about $4 million this year. It was going to be close to $10 million. They really did a masterful job of using void years for the first time ever in some of these deals. And some of those dead money hits as a result of those void years, not a lot. Total dead money hits the next couple of years of like $3-4 million. So I really like what they did this offseason. Really like it. Where does the Russell Wilson thing stand? Again, as Eric and I talked last week, I think it's 95% that he's with the team now. There is some thought. Chad Forbes yesterday said pure speculation, but I have a hunch John Schneider's probably in love with Trey Lance. And I think there's some validity to that. We know there are 2 quarterback prospects over the last 5-6 years that Schneider has fallen in love with. Josh Allen, to the point that reportedly the Seahawks were talking about trading Russell Wilson to the Cleveland Browns that year for the number 1 pick to select Allen. And Patrick Mahomes, when some thought that he was kind of a flawed prospect and was going to be there at the end of the first round in his draft year, there were reports that if he had been there, the Seahawks were going to take him, even with Russell Wilson. So Schneider likes those really freaky, kind of dripping with talent upside quarterbacks. That's Trey Lance. And what Forbes said is if the Bears can figure out a way to get Trey Lance, now Schneider's interested, they could still get Russell Wilson. That's not going to happen. The Bears just don't have the ammo to get up because now, and here's why. Shoot, it's probably a 99%. There's probably a 1% possibility that Wilson gets moved at this point because the Bears are out of it. You're not going to get Trey Lance. Most people think Trey Lance is a better prospect than Justin Fields, even though Fields wowed at his pro day yesterday, throwing in shorts. Here's the thing. Justin Fields, 90% of his throws last year were to his first read for Ohio State. Reputation on Trey Lance, makes all the calls, sets the offensive line, runs that offense. Really advanced when it comes to reading defenses and operating an offense. I think that's the kind of thing that would appeal to Schneider. But the Atlanta Falcons sit there at number 4. Now that the 49ers have moved up to 3, kind of shaking up the draft, that was crazy. Don't have time to talk about all that. They're going to take a quarterback. We're going to have quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3 this year. We're going to have quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, 4. Because the Falcons are going to take 1, 2. And with Matt Ryan in place there, it would make sense to take Trey Lance. Go with the kid with the bigger upside. Let him sit for a year. So you're not going to get him. The only way at this point, and this is the last breath I'm gonna invest in this episode, is if the Miami Dolphins were to decide they want Russell Wilson. If the Miami Dolphins weren't committed to Tua Tagovailoa, they could call John Schneider tomorrow, get him interested, and I think they could get a deal done. That's assuming the Seahawks like Tua and think he's a guy you can build around. Just 2 years ago, what were we talking about? We were talking about teams tanking for him, right? And now he's 2 years removed from the hip injury. If the Seahawks thought he was the guy, Miami could get that deal done. Miami could even get that deal done without giving up the 6th pick. Now they have an extra first as a result of their moving down to 12 and then back up to 6. They have an extra future first. They could really make an offer and probably still hold on to the 6th pick. Give the Seahawks, I think it's 18. Is their second first-round pick? Tua and 3 firsts probably gets that done. Seahawks can take that 18th pick, trade down with it. That's the only way it gets done. But Miami sure looks like they're moving forward with Tua. Remaining needs. Salary cap right now, according to Over the Cap today, they're $1.8 million over. But that doesn't include the new Gabe Jackson deal, so that frees up about $5.5 million. Also, though, doesn't include Al Woods or Carlos Dunlap. So they're probably right up against it. But it doesn't look like they had to restructure any of Russell Wilson's salary and push any of that cap hit into future years. We'll see. I'd still like to see him extend Brandon Shell, if possible. His cap hit's $5.4 million this year. If you could convince him to add another 2 years to his deal, you could lower that a little bit. Because right now, as much as I like the new Gabe Jackson deal, so now he's committed for 3 years. He's committed through 2023. The original Raiders deal only had him signed through 2022. Now you've got Damian Lewis, rookie draft pick last year, and Gabe Jackson, 2 outstanding guards. Best guard combo the Seahawks have had in a very long time, and I'd have to go back a ways. They're locked up for a few years. But both your starting tackles, Dwayne Brown, Brandon Shell, free agents next year. That's a tough spot to be in. How do you fix that? We're going to get into that in just a second. And they need another cornerback. Quentin Dunbar has a couple visits lined up next week. But he commented on Facebook on a Seahawks-related story yesterday that talks are ongoing with the Seahawks. It's going good. They want him back. He loves it here. I think that's going to happen. If his knee is sound, he's the ideal piece to add back to that. Give him an offseason of preparation without the drama he went through last year with the legal charges. And then if that knee's good, man, he's a guy that can play inside and outside. Now that secondary starts to look pretty good. There's talk of bringing Richard Sherman back. Might get into that next week. I have mixed feelings about that. A lot of talk about center still. I mentioned maybe they sign a veteran like Austin Ryder if the cost comes down. But I'm not so sure that's as big a need as people think it is. You can address it in the draft, and I'm gonna outline that in just a second. But 2 things. There's a chance that Ethan Posick could take a step forward. He's only 25 years old still. Center was his primary position at LSU, played it at a very high level in the SEC. And now you've put him between two really good guards. One of the reasons Posick struggled in the second half last year after having a good first half is because once Mike Upati started breaking down and trying to play through it, trying to play hurt, and then Jordan Simmons had to give way to Jordan Simmons at times, that put more pressure on Posick. Playing between Jackson and Lewis and another year of continuity, being able to commit himself to playing center again, he could still be league average. But don't count out Kyle Fuller. Seahawks tendered him as an exclusive rights free agent this year. About $1 million tender. Kyle Fuller was an outstanding college center. Only 27 years old, 6'5", 320. He's bigger than Posick. Posick's a little longer, leaner. Played at Baylor. He was drafted in the 7th round 2017 by the Texans. Started 2 games his rookie year. Seahawks signed in their practice squad in 2019. He played in 9 games last year, started 1 while Posick was injured. At Baylor, 3-year starter. Started 39 straight games at center to close out his career. And he was an ascending talent. His sophomore year, honorable mention, All Big 12. His junior year, second team All Big 12. Senior year, All Big 12. On an offensive line that led the Big 12 in rushing and allowed only 1 sack per game. There are some who think Kyle Fuller can beat out Ethan Posick and be the starting center. But you want to look to the draft? Seahawks only have 3 picks. We know that. A 2nd, a 4th, and 7th. You've heard about how interior offensive line is a strength of this draft, and you can get a good one in the 2nd and 3rd rounds. Some of those better centers might be gone. So I wanted to look at the draft 2 ways. If you target a center as your main objective and how that might look, how the board might fall after that, or if you target left tackle. Because there's a good chance there's a couple really intriguing left tackles that could slide. And you think, well, why would you draft left tackle this year? We've got Dwayne Brown. Because as I said earlier, Dwayne Brown at his age, in his mid-30s, a guy that has to manage his body and his knees, at his price point, going into next year, maybe you take that guy this year, especially a guy that might need a year. And then you're ready to roll next year with a left tackle, a young, affordable left tackle. So, did a couple mock drafts. Traded down in both instances. The example I used was I had Tampa Bay coming up from the last pick in the 2nd round, giving us a 4th rounder, matched up perfectly on the trade chart. Seahawks dropped down to 67. A couple of trade backs. And then I got an offer to move back like 2 spots and pick up a 6th, I think. So here's kind of how it looks if you target a center first. The guys that you really want, Landon Dickerson, Creed Humphrey, Quinn Miners, even the kid out of Wisconsin, Whitewater, who blew up the Senior Bowl, they're gone. But Josh Myers out of Ohio State was still there at 67 in this first scenario. 6'5", 312. Keith Myers on their podcast I was on with them last week compares him to Max Unger. Has some athletic limitations, but fits in a zone blocking scheme. Outstanding shotgun center. Equally good in the run game, pass protector. Scouting reports I've read say he projects as a solid, average starting center in the NFL. Then at 129, Keith Taylor. And he's a kid that I target in every mock draft that I do. 6'2" corner out of Washington. 33.5-inch arms. He fits the Seahawks mold to a T. Ran a 4.5 at his pro day yesterday. And he was the best cover corner at the Senior Bowl all week and in the game against some pretty good wide receivers. Would love to see Keith Taylor added. He's a guy that I think could start in his 2nd year. But then at 142, I still was able to get a developmental left tackle in this scenario. You go Myers first, but Jalen Moore out of Western Michigan, really interesting kid in that range. 6'4", 311, 3-year starter, experienced, really fluid mover in pass protection, and a fit in a zone blocking scheme. At 150, Darius Stills, talked about him before, 3 technique, 6'1", 281, West Virginia, penetrating, relentless motor, kind of guy the Seahawks love and can always find a spot for on the roster. And then at 250, Trey Walker, really interesting, dynamic wide receiver out of San Jose State. 79 catches, 1,200 yards last year, can also return punts. I think he'd fit really well in that Rams-based kind of scheme that Shane Waldron's bringing with him with the crossing routes. Now, if you look at that same scenario, and this is why I think you're going to see some value in this. If you target left tackle, same trade down scenario. At 67, Walker Little out of Stanford. Brady Christensen from BYU, outstanding pass protector, was also there. Little, higher risk, higher reward. Out of Stanford, 6'7", 309. He missed most of 2019 with a shoulder injury. I think he got hurt in the first game. And then he opted out of 2020. This is a guy who projected to be a first-round pick if he had played last year. If you can get him at 67, hasn't played in a year and a half, but he's got the traits. Projects as a first-round type left tackle talent. Take him at 67, coach him up, let him learn behind Dwayne Brown, have him inactive on game days. There's a lot of logic and value in that. At 132, I did a little bit of a different trade down scenario than the first one. I took Taylor again. I went wide receiver earlier, though, at 137, Shi Smith. He really shined at the Senior Bowl. Could be Tyler Lockett's successor if you move on from Lockett, if he becomes too expensive, with he and Metcalf both commanding extensions after this season. Slot receiver, really quick and dynamic with the ball in his hands. Was able to get a center at 147, Drake Jackson. He's a little smaller center. And then with their last pick, I was able to go with a right tackle prospect. Alaric Jackson out of Iowa. 2 years ago, was an ascending talent, along with Tristan Wirfs. Kind of looked like he might work his way into a day 1 or 2 profile. Doesn't profile that way anymore. He's sort of plateaued. He's big, strong, physical, fits more at right tackle. He's not a left tackle. So in that scenario, you lock up your potential franchise left tackle with the 67th pick, a guy that can carry on for Dwayne Brown and save you some cap space in future years. You get Taylor in both those scenarios. You get a smaller, sort of shifty, dynamic, inside slot receiver type wide receiver in both those scenarios. So the trade-off is, would you rather have Drake Jackson and Alaric Jackson and Walker Little to add to the offensive line mix in the future, or Josh Myers and Jalen Moore? I got to watch some film on Moore because I kind of like that first scenario. The risk of Little being away from the game as long as he has is certainly a concern. He's the higher ceiling prospect for sure. But the value of a Myers and a Jalen Moore, if you think Moore can be an everyday player, Darius Stills, Keith Taylor, that's a fun little draft group. So when the Seahawks started their offseason, I was afraid. Too many holes to fill, not enough flexibility to do it. I thought they were going to be unwilling to make a gutsy move and trade a Bobby Wagner or a Jamal Adams or a Tyler Lockett to add draft capital. I was right about that. But they clearly had a plan, and they really worked at it. They didn't just sit back, as they have some years, many years. They didn't just sit back and let the market kind of fall and then pick up pieces. They had a plan, and they got aggressive in some areas. And I really like what they did. I think they've put themselves back in position to contend for the division. Whereas 3 weeks ago, I thought they were the third best roster in the division, maybe the fourth best. I think they're right there now with the Rams and 49ers. Where does this leave them with Jamal Adams? Don't know. It doesn't seem like they're in a hurry to sign him to that lucrative extension. They might be having second thoughts about that. Maybe they're hoping he can play out the season on the last year of his deal. We might be talking about a holdout here in a month or two. We'll see. We'll see. Only a couple of minutes left. I want to shout out some thank yous. Kevin Jablonski, the guys at Hollywood and Vine Recording Studio, for sponsoring the show. Eric Briggs for his support, both as a guest and contributing to marketing the show. Alex Morietti, Jordan Van Beek. I want to say thank you to Mark and AJ at the 365 Sportscast Network. This will be the last show on the network in the live spot. We commit quarterly, and I'm not going to carry on through the next quarter. Just the commitment to do the live spot every Wednesday just doesn't work for me right now. I'd rather have the flexibility, being able to do the show whenever my schedule or breaking news warrants it. But I love what those guys have going on at the network, and I think they're going to do great things. And they've left an open invitation for me to rejoin the network at some point in the future if it works better for me, and I thank them for that. Great to work with. Continue to follow them. Download the app if you haven't already. They're adding new shows and new talent all the time. A lot of cool things going on over there. Until then, save and subscribe to the podcast, because this is going to carry on as a podcast. We'll be back next week, and I'll be live streaming on video more often. So really, go to the YouTube channel, Emerald City Sportscast, subscribe, like that. Hang in there. The Emerald City Sportscast is going to continue to grow. When we come back next week, we'll take a look at the Mariners' first week. First time through the rotation, how the starting pitching looked. I'll do another mock draft with no trades, just the 3 picks. How can they maximize those? Until then, I am Dan Viens. This is the Emerald City Sportscast. We will see you on the other side.